Yeah, Vinay?
He's not on stage, is he?
I
Yeah,
just
he is in
invited him up.
India
I
for.
think he's
Yeah,
porting up. Yeah, he's here.
I'm
yeah.
here. What's up?
Oh,
You're in Bangalore?
Actually, I'm in Hyderabad, heading back home to Bangalore.
Okay, there you
I'm
go.
at the airport. Yep.
Okay, and then Sudamini, what part of India are you in, or you're remote somewhere?
I'm in the capital, New Delhi.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so I am almost ready. 2 more seconds, please.
I can't see Vinay. It's funny that this is what you were saying, Tyler. I can't
Yes.
see him, but
Yeah,
he
just
can talk.
PTR, and it should work. Should clear it up.
Okay.
Pin the top tweet. So now the top tweet is the live stream on the Twitter account. Okay. Now we just need our friend to make it official. You know, kind of like the Olympic ceremony. We need the air horn to really. Whoa, whoa. Where is it? There we go.
Oh,
Now it's official. Here
all
we
is well
go.
in the world.
Woo. Okay. So the top story. And by the way, thank you to the fantastic tweets that people are sending in today. Unusually good tweets that we're going to get into. But first, as always, we get through the top stories and then we get into the tweets that everyone's sending in. And the top story right now is from The Verge. It says Zuckerberg says he's redirected Facebook teams to serve young adults over older users, and that significant changes to Instagram will lean into video and reels. Right. Well, as predicted, as I said, Instagram's, and not only Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, all of these social apps are going to move from images into videos and live streams and e-commerce. Been telling you this for exactly 6 months now. Those who have been with us every day know how often I've been repeating this. And now Mark Zuckerberg said this yesterday because Facebook had their quarterly earnings report since we met last time, about 10 hours ago, where every 3 months, all the companies on the stock exchange have to do their book report for all their investors. You know, just like when you were a kid in school and you had to talk in front of the class and show what's going on. Well, that's happening right now. Facebook just did theirs. We're going to get into the results of that in a minute. But when you do your quarterly earnings report, you got to show the key metrics and data: how many new subscribers how many users, monthly active users do you have, how much
You don't
revenue
have to
did you have.
show any of that, Tyler.
Yeah,
That's not SEC required, by the way. They do not have to show it. A lot of companies
legally,
show it.
you don't have to show it. If you didn't show it, your company would collapse the next day.
No, no. Well, look, well, Tyler. Well, I'm saying one of the big pet peeves I've had since
Yes,
I was in the industry
yes,
is that companies put out whatever metrics they want, and
yes.
you're right. They put out enough metrics, that they hope that this is where. But they
Sure.
also very often don't put out metrics that the street wants to see,
Yep.
and there's certain things that are required by the SEC, but these metrics are not required. I just want to be clear
Yes.
about
When I said they have to, I don't mean legally. I mean
Okay, okay. I just want
financially. I mean,
okay.
if Facebook were to have said, you know what, we're not going to tell you how we did this quarter, the stock would be down
No, no,
25%.
no, no, no. They have to report like economic results, but like
Yep.
daily active users, those
Yes.
types of metrics, and
Yes.
those are all voluntary.
Yes.
Didn't Apple have a thing where they were going to tell everyone how many cell phones they make at one point or whatever, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not going to report that anymore because it's not relevant, just because it's about to
That's what I'm
plateau."
saying. They do what they do what they want.
So the first article, we'll take these chronologically. So the first one says Facebook says it's refocusing company on serving young adults. Expect
And I can be
changes.
specific because I was on the call. If you
Okay,
want me,
great. Yeah,
okay, I
but I
was on the
want
call.
people to know that the call even exists. So now that we're going
Okay,
this week especially is like peak week of earnings season, especially for big tech, because you've got Apple and Google. I think tomorrow you got Amazon and Microsoft also this week. This is like the big week of the stock market for Q3. Facebook
and
went first.
and by the way, just so everybody knows, most companies these days, which was not the case when I started in the business, because technology, whatever, different. They now put their calls on their websites usually in a recording. So even if you missed a call, you can go back and you can listen to it at your leisure. I very often don't even do that. Sometimes if I missed a call, you can get from Seeking Alpha, you can get the transcript of a call, which now that AI, by the way, has gotten better and they're able to the transcriptions are much better than they used to be. So if they're not missing words, you could actually literally read through the transcript of the call faster than you could listen to the call. So there's both options for almost any company, by the way, not just Facebook. Okay, so I just wanted to make that point. But specifically on the youth, by the way, he defined the youth as 18 to 29. He was real careful not to talk about kids below 18. So I just want to
okay. Interesting insight. Any other interesting kind of takeaways from the call?
Oh yeah, there were several. So you know this new metaverse stuff that they're doing? Okay. So that is this year that's about a $10 billion expense. They quantified that.
That's huge.
It's going to be much larger next year. Okay. Total, and they didn't break it out next year, but they said net total capital spending will be about $30 billion
Holy
for the
shit.
entire company.
Holy shit.
How much Microsoft spent on theirs?
Excuse me?
The military.
Well, most of it probably on this, I think, on this metaverse thing. But one of the things they're doing going forward is they will break out the results of the new initiatives on this metaverse stuff from their other businesses, so that you can track it, and also this way they don't get penalized by these big expenses, on their existing business, so you can separate them, which is smart. And it's more transparent, and they did say, Tyler, by the way, because when they went into the results for the quarter, they talked about some of the headwinds they had. Because what was interesting,
TikTok.
they kind of brought down
Apple.
They brought down revenue. What? Yeah, Apple, right? They brought down revenue guidance because of Apple, and they blamed Apple. Okay, of course. And they said if it wasn't for Apple, they'd actually be, they would be up. You know, Apple's okay. And trying to remember some of the other stuff was
that's good. That's a lot of takeaway.
No, I can give you some more.
Okay.
You want to
while you think about them, I'll comment that the stock responded. Generally, the stock gets a bit volatile in the moments when they immediately, the second pop that they release the data, and then when the data comes out, there's people listening to the data in real time, looking for it in real time. And then because if you're a day trader and you've got a super hyper fast connection and really fast execution, you can get a jump on everybody else. Because sometimes these results are far above or below what's expected. So you could get a really big pop. Sometimes 10, 20, I've even seen 20%, depending on if you have a really, if you have a strong result either above or below what was expected. And so you have tens of thousands of day traders sitting there with their finger, they've already put in their order, for 1,000 shares, and they have their their finger on the mouse ready to click the buy or sell button when that data comes out. And in this case, regardless, when the data comes out, the stock's going to move in a bit of a volatile way. And in this case, Facebook stock went up after the data came out, for those who are wondering. And not a lot, like 1%, just over 1%, which is kind of mild. But technically, they did miss on their kind of the main metrics, which for example is the kind of the quarterly profit. So, for example, Facebook reported their Q3 revenue was up 35% since last year. That's very important to note. They're making 35% more now than they did a year ago. And most people would say, Facebook's dying, Facebook's dying, Facebook's dying. Well, they're made 35% more this year than in last year. So please explain how Facebook is dying, and I'll fill you in on how they managed to do that. Because while Americans think that it's dying because the kids aren't using it, they're growing around the world. There's these other countries. I know Americans are always very confused to learn this, but there's other countries on this globe called Earth, and Facebook is growing there. It's going there. They're actually going into these countries that you can't spell. Yeah, it's amazing. and they're growing there. And when they go into those countries, the entire country uses Facebook like it's the internet. They don't use it the same way like they do in America, where it's one of 100 apps you have. It's the only app on their whole goddamn phone. They have one app. It's Facebook. That's it. They have to do everything entirely through Facebook. So now the light bulb goes on. Oh, wow. So there's these other countries. There's about 200 of them, actually. And Facebook's growing there. And when they grow there, they get really deeply into how those countries, how the people there operate. So when the Facebook outage happened, as much of a tragedy as it was for you that one of your hundreds of apps went out in America, imagine it's the only app you have on your phone. It's your whole internet. So literally, because they subsidize the data to access the internet in those countries. So anyway, that's why they had revenues up. They're taking more ad dollars, and that's why the media, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and everyone else is still so incredibly furiously angry at Facebook because they're still growing like a monster. And
Zuckerberg, what you did, I sent that note to you that basically Zuckerberg admits, he said there's collusion, as you pointed out, among these major media companies. He didn't go as far as talking about that they're competitors, but he basically said, specifically, he said that basically they colluded to put out negative stories from these leaked documents.
Right. So now this is to me the most interesting thing that happened with Facebook yesterday. Yesterday we had all the corporate dying media of America, of which Facebook is stealing their juicy ad revenue that they were built on, and evidenced by the fact that they grew 35% over the past year. Yesterday, all of those all those media companies, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Verge, you name it, CNN, blah, 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 they all together wrote dozens. Am I exaggerating when I say dozens? No, dozens. Dozens of articles came out yesterday. Each one of those publications wrote a handful of articles. We're talking 15 different, no, it's actually 20 different publications, each of them doing
It was like the finale during a 4th of July show.
Each of those 20 publications did 3, 4, sometimes 5, 6 articles about Facebook. So do 5 times 20. That's 100 articles came out yesterday about Facebook and how tragically bad and how dangerous and evil and sinister Facebook is. That happened yesterday. Now, what happened when those articles came out? The objective there is to, shake up Facebook, to rock the boat, to push them, and what did the stock market do when all of those hundreds of negative articles, hit pieces came out about Facebook? The stock went up.
But they also announced a $50 billion share buyback. I wanted to make that. So that was important too. But
the stock went up before the earnings report. The stock went up at the opening of the market.
Well, I don't think the articles were going to impact the stock. I was a little concerned that they brought down guidance that normally might knock down the stock. But I think that the stuff that they said about the metaverse and breaking it out and the transparency and $50 billion is a very large share buyback. Having said that, though, they have $8 billion left on the existing authorization. So a lot of times companies announce these share buybacks, but they don't actually necessarily follow through on them. But what I think is important is that they could even do a $50 billion share buyback. I think they ended the quarter with like $59 billion in cash. And that was the point I keep making when people talk about these whatever you want to call them, pegged cryptocurrencies. Why I would always take one from Facebook before I would take the other ones, because they actually have the cash. If they want to do dollar for dollar, you could believe them. They have the dollars.
Wait, did you say? Okay, I heard this earlier. $30 billion is going to go into investment into the metaverse. So that's what Facebook announced. $30 billion, right? Is that what you guys just said?
Over time.
Yeah. No, next year.
Quarterly revenue was $29 billion.
Yeah, but they're going to invest $30 billion into metaverse stuff. And Tyler,
yes.
to your point, right? Like, guys, notice, okay, the pandemic started. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure most of us have
But
experienced this, right?
that's
Where
happening next year. Yeah, but yeah.
yeah, where you notice how you get like all these Facebook requests now from all these people, like who are all these people requesting, and they have like different names. That's what Tyler's talking about, right? Like the whole planet is coming on this thing in like swarms, right? And we only make up 5% of the world. That's it. We're only 5% of the planet. So the growth potential, the market for Facebook is very. It's still
here's
long.
a data point to prove exactly to your point. Now Facebook stated they have 3.58 billion people use Facebook family of apps, which is now up 12% from a year ago. They have 12% more users now than last year. The company made 28.2 billion last quarter, up 33% since last year, and a profit of 9 billion. And the headline from NBC News is Facebook reports $9 billion profit on day that documents highlight internal anger. Vox says Wall Street doesn't care about the Facebook leaks. And Bloomberg says stocks gain before earnings call. Yes, even before the earnings call started, while everyone knew all of those dozens of documents, all those dozens of headlines, those hit pieces were all unleashed simultaneously. It's kind of like when Gaza launches all the missiles simultaneously. Yeah, didn't translate into anything. So I don't know what to say, mainstream media. Facebook is still kicking your ass handedly. Even though you're launching your full-on jihad, it means nothing.
The thing that would actually be significant is if they took off the share button off their front page. I just checked 3 of these websites. They still have the little Facebook tracker button on their front page, still sending, because they're reliant on that. Many of these journalists are paid by how many retweets they get, how many shares they get on Facebook. Their paychecks are paid to it. And I keep bringing this point up because it's very relevant for however much grandstanding journalism does about criticizing a tech. As long as they're financially tied to it, they're not going to be able to actually say anything that's actually significant. And yeah, I'm astounded that essentially that this hasn't been called out more often.
Interestingly, I'm not seeing. There are some new stories coming out, but it's very possible that we've seen the vast majority of the mainstream media's massive big push. They kind of shot all of their fireworks all at once in a big grand finale, and it doesn't appear there's going to be much more to go. It seems like the Facebook has weathered the storm, and Operation, Jihad seems to have been a resounding failure.
Are you cheering them,
But
Tyler?
I was going to add one point. Okay. I was going to add one point, Tyler. I think that the metaverse, to Mahir's point, is much bigger than what we envision and what Facebook is doing, which isn't a game theory, but will be more hybrid of the real world. And that's what Wall Street is really looking at. Because you start adding, AI, quantum, it's just going to be much different. It's going to be what's even Bloomberg Tech, Emily Chang covered this. It's going to be much different than what the web is now. We're going to be at a web 6.0, so to speak. And so I think people don't understand what's coming, but the investors do, and that's why the stock's not trading down. In addition to just a basic communication, it's funny because in Sudan, quickly, there was a coup over the weekend or last day or so, and first thing they did was cut off all internet connectivity. So in Sudan's close to Ethiopia and in Africa and all this, so that they can't communicate. But alternatively, people will find a way to do that. And once these things come online, there'll just be no stoppage. And it won't be sort of this just hybrid gaming environment where geeks or others are escaping the world. It'll be a hybrid between, in my opinion, the real world and the merge world, where you can transact, and you've talked about this, in real time on transactions. We won't know the difference. It'll simulate everything. And that's what I think Marcus is focused on and why they're spending so much money on it.
I think, by the way, on the metaverse stuff, there is one thing that could take down all these tech companies, right? And that is going to be it's actually hardware, not software. in this space, right? The big old goggles, right? The big old, I got the Oculus stuff. Nobody's gonna be walking around with those things, right? It's gonna be the contact lens mixed with the glass technology or the glass tech, whoever comes out with that, and if those people could protect it, right, and create rules around that, because that's where everything's going to be around. And like Ellis just said, I mean, it's going to be way different. I mean, you're talking about three dimensional. We're looking at screens that are 2D, right? We're talking about 3D data, right? 3D UI. 3D alphabets, right? Pan in, zoom out, let stuff skinned and signs go away, right? I mean, like even knobs on airplanes, right? When you can sit there and have custom holograms that are basically you can operate them. Everything is completely going to change. And the thing is, people think it's the future. No, it's already here. The tech is here. The mix of technologies are actually here right now, right? And so, I hope that tech, whoever, it's a hardware play. Whoever comes out with that hardware is going to basically be king, in my opinion. I'm complete.
Okay.
And one thing, Tyler, sorry for the room. I'm here. There's a smart mobility summit coming up in Israel on November. To anyone in the room, but you can free registration on the virtual side. It's in Tel Aviv, but they're going to bring out a lot of tech that exists in Israel and that's going global. But it's basically for startups. So anyone that wants to do that, it'll be great. It's free registration to attend virtually, so it's all good.
Okay. So I'm just going to blaze through a bunch of the headlines about Facebook that are still lingering in the aftermath of the Jihad yesterday. It's, for example, there is the detail that Facebook plans to invest $10 billion plus on AR and VR this year, including metaverse apps and related hardware, and report FRL segment separating starting in Q4, as Ken perfectly stated. And then next one is leaked documents detail staff's suggestions to solve Facebook's problems, include deprioritize engagement, reduce AI reliance, and focus on safety in developing countries. And then Facebook said, no, that's not what we're interested in doing. And thank you for your kind suggestions. As one of our 60,000 employees, that's very nice. You feel free to go start your own social network. And then Associated Press says that Facebook docs detail issues with moderating non-English speech, leading to inflammatory language. Oh my God, it led to inflammatory language? Holy shit. Facebook. Associated Press headline, Facebook documents detail issues with moderating non-English speech, leading to inflammatory language in Afghanistan. Holy shit. Guys, this is getting serious. People are starting to use inflammatory language on Facebook because there's issues with moderating non-English speech, and now people are using inflammatory language. Oh dear sweet Lord. Let's hope we live through this apocalypse. The next one from Wired, internal documents reveal a farewell posts of some Facebook employees disillusioned with the company unwilling or unable to change. Oh, you mean like when Mrs. Weiss, Barry Weiss left the New York Times? You mean like that? You mean like her goodbye letter where she said you're a toxic work environment? You mean like that?
Well, hold on, Tyler. There's a difference though, dude. In the United States, you could get away with inflammatory speech for the most part, right?
Uh-huh.
But in all these other countries that they're moving into, it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out, because the politics over there, in many countries, they don't. You can't talk about the politicians.
Yes.
You can't talk about politics. You know what I mean? So it's like it's really interesting.
Yes. Hello from Thailand. Yeah, I know something about that.
There was just another article, but there was an article I just read the other day, though. I think in Vietnam, they pulled their punches because of the government over there. So
yeah, well, the publications are accusing Facebook of doing what Vietnam insists that they do, which is removing people who speak out negatively against the state. And Vietnam says, hey, you can't talk negatively against the state. Hey, Facebook, take that down. Facebook's like, you got it, boss. It's your country, boss. By the way, just so you know, if you're in Thailand and you even like a Facebook article that is negative about the monarch, you will spend your life in jail. For liking a Facebook article, specifically a BBC article that was negative about the crown, 22 people liked that Facebook article. They are now enjoying life in a concrete box.
better be very careful what you click on over there, then, right?
Correct.
Even
Well, then the other piece of that is that the Facebook translation used a word that was not flattering. This was what, maybe 3-4 months ago, Tyler?
Yep.
And so now, many of you may have noticed, like if you read a post from a friend or from anyone in another language, there's a translation that can pop up. Facebook no longer translates from Thai into English because of one word on one post 3 or 4 months ago that was not flattering to the people that we're not to talk about in this
Now,
country.
how does mainstream media feel about what if Facebook had removed that BBC article? The mainstream media would freak out. Oh, Facebook is silencing stuff we don't want them to silence. And then there's headlines today how Facebook wasn't silencing Breitbart. So basically, you have a whole bunch of people all wanting to dictate how Mark Zuckerberg curates the voices at his platform, Facebook. They don't want Breitbart. They do want BBC. If Facebook removes BBC in Thailand, they're going to freak out. Great, go start your own network. You
But
can
by the way, Tyler,
go have your own party. You can invite whoever you want to your party, and you can ban whoever you want from your party. Facebook seems to be doing just fine. They're kicking your ass. They seem to know what they're doing.
well, Tyler, I do want to make the point that Mark spent some time talking about this issue on the call. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and one of the things he said, he kind of acknowledged there were some issues and said they would welcome some regulation because the, you know you, they don't necessarily know what to do, and it's obviously particularly internationally very complicated because sometimes things don't translate well. They don't have all sorts of stuff. But I think they would benefit. I think that his view, even though he didn't go out this far and say that, all these larger tech companies would kind of benefit themselves from a little regulation because it would make it so difficult for smaller companies to rise up to compete with them. Could you imagine if someone wanted to come up with a smaller version of even the part of Facebook that deals with news and politics, and all of a sudden the government had all these rules about what you had to take down and how many moderators you had to have? They couldn't afford it. At least Facebook could afford this stuff. He just basically wants some guidelines onto what to do. And he did say, Tyler, okay, he did say, very politically adept statement, he thinks there needs to be some balance between social responsibility and profits. He
Yep.
didn't give a total capitalist rant today. I just wanted to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and he
Okay.
did say something about Southeast Asia, by the way. I thought you'd find interesting.
What's that?
One of the issues they said in the quarter was it was the one section of the world they brought up that said has this COVID outbreak that caused them a little revenue deceleration in Southeast Asia because there was a COVID outbreak. So he didn't get into which countries.
Okay. There's a whole lot more of these internal document headlines. Like The Verge says internal documents show Facebook is struggling to attract U.S. users under the age of 30. And now that headline seems pointless after the quarter earnings report. By the way, Politico says internal documents employees touted its scale and dominance in presentations. A whole bunch of Bloomberg internal Facebook docs show time spent by U.S. teenagers in March was down 16% year over year. Young U.S. adults spent 5% less time. Yeah, great. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a boop boop? It don't matter. And that's great. Well, by the way, Bloomberg, people of all ages are reducing their viewing of all of this. All of you guys who are trying to paint this picture that life is bad at Facebook and people are jumping off of the, Facebook's yacht. No, actually, they're more jumping off of your yacht statistically than Facebook's. Facebook is growing much faster than you are.
And Tyler, I just want to add a different perspective quickly.
But
I think,
isn't it interesting that a company that's dying is trying to paint the picture that their competitor who's kicking their ass is dying without revealing that they themselves are getting their asses kicked? Go ahead, Ellis.
Well, I was going to say that it's interesting because I think where Mark and Facebook may be going globally and other companies is sort of that P3, public-private partnership. Not so much utilities, but where they do have responsibility, and that's what I think Mark is doing. And to Ken's point, even if Facebook did it. They just don't become bigger, but they can buy smaller companies, but it's separate. So you're talking about a world where we as humans collectively maintain control, but it's not an oligarchy, for certain companies or entities and so forth. And so it's intriguing because Marx always said this. It's just weird. He's always said it should be more liberal, more, just let people do what they do and we'll figure it out. But then there's that balance. So I think maybe the world should go to that or is heading there, especially in the metaverse, if you're talking about that.
So check this out.
And that's intriguing to me. Yeah.
Check this out. So here's what's about to happen. It just became clear to me. We had the PC era, which was websites. We had the smartphone era, which was apps. Now we're going into two new eras simultaneously. The metaverse era, which is a whole new platform of AR and VR and MR, mixed reality, and the AI assistants like Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri, what have you. Now, in both of these two massive platforms that are exploding as we speak, Facebook just announced they're investing billions, tens of billions into it this year, right? That's a huge investment. Now, in that new landscape of the metaverse and the Google Assistants, notice it's a lot of three-dimensional visuals, I should say, and audio with the assistants. Now, how will news be consumed in this new era of Google Assistants? I can imagine Siri and Google Assistant and even Facebook Assistant in the metaverse knowing what news I like to read. Right? Now watch where this goes. This gets very interesting. So you have the mainstream media doing all their articles. You have AI bots, like imagine Google Assistant is reading all of the news. Google already sends me on my iPhone, when I go to google.com, there's articles under the search bar that are tailored to me. And oh boy, are they accurate. Holy shit, is that exactly the type of articles I like to read. It's really impressive how their algorithm knows the types of articles I'm interested in. Now, they can now read. AI in recent weeks, in months, has gotten to a point where the AI can read those articles and understand them. And Google Assistant could tell me its own synopsis of those articles and say, hey, Tyler, you ready for the news? Here it is. Here's what happened on this and 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 this. Great. Thank you, Siri. Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Google Assistant. Guess where I'm getting my news now? From these AIs that understand and digest the news across multiple sources and then reads them to me like a human would. Right?
It goes a step further, right? Like when they could start
but please understand, that means no one's going to these sources directly anymore. Now you're starting to understand the death rattle behind this jihad. They are now real. And the metaverse, when we go in the metaverse, do you think you're going to be reading text versions of the New York Times in the metaverse? Hell no. You're going to have an avatar walk up to you named Alexa, and she's going to be like, oh, here's the actual news that I know you're going to want, and here's the interesting way that I know you're going to want it. If you have the luxury of joining Tech News Around the World and having actual humans do it with you, and the way that Ken just gave us the update of the earnings call, we likely will have AI bots that can do precisely that in the next couple of years. When this happens, whether it be in the metaverse with actual humans or avatars or the Google Assistants and the AI with GPT-3 and all that, either way, this does not bode well for these legacy print-based media companies because they're not going to be able to adapt into the metaverse and the assistants.
But the AI is also going to act as a journalist as well themselves. They're going to also write it. Like right now they're doing the synapses, right? But then they're also going to be able to detect news that we don't even know about that you can't get. Now so you start connecting between like different regions of, hey, this is going on here and this is going on here and this is going on there, and they're going to present it. And it's not just going to be reading stuff like, you have the avatar in front of you, but you get like the spatial aspect of going into the metaverse and having holograms. It's all about the holograms, right? And being able to go in and say, hey, you're in a space, and you could go into the region, and then now you have it'll be a strange experience of having holograms where you're kind of seeing a space, you're not there, but then you have an overlay of augmented reality within the holograms pointing at different pieces of data points, and you could just start going in and pushing in and zooming in and out into the data itself, and like going down to these trees of information, and all that will be likely AI created and generated, right? So that's going to be, I mean, AI journalists are pretty much almost here.
I mean,
I think
you're already seeing it with things like Copy AI. If Copy AI just read your Google feed, Tyler, it would
Yep.
come up with a cohesive one paragraph statement about the world today.
I think it's also one of the reasons why, these media companies are hating on Facebook so much, because Facebook is one of the companies that's able to evolve. I mean, the amount of changes that they've made since they started keeps them, being on top, while these news companies just don't have any idea of how to evolve in order not to die.
Okay.
Yeah, but speaking of Tyler, of the AR, VR stuff, on
Yeah.
Thursday, Facebook is doing something they call
Connect.
the Facebook Connect, right? And so, yeah,
It's
wanted to
their
mention
big
that.
annual event where they highlight all the new stuff around VR, AR, whatnot with their Oculus. By the way, speaking of that, is JT on stage? He found an article about a new leak of the new upcoming Oculus, which they'll likely announce at that event on Thursday. We will definitely watch that together. I don't know if we should live stream it or whatever. We probably
He
should.
said something on the call. Do you want me to tell you what he said about that on the call?
Yeah.
Something about I have his comments right here. Hold on. It was something about. I mean, I don't know if this is the thing that this is new, but it was something about like 128. Hold on, I'll get back to you on it. I
And
have.
Ken, while you're working on it, but Bloomberg Tech, Emily Chain covered it. They said that he might almost switch the name of Facebook.
Yeah, that's
So there was
expected
a
as well.
scoop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he
He
switches
didn't
that to the
mention that.
metaverse, right? If he switches that though to something like Mahir said to the metaverse, it's game over. I'm serious, especially if he gives tidbits about what I think, and I'm just guessing, this metaverse will be, which is not just gaming. It won't be what people are thinking it is. It's going to be a serious hybrid to the real world. And it's going to merge the two. And so if that occurs, it's going to be very significant. And so maybe that's why things are going well.
And by the way, just to be clear, guys, they're not going to invest and build stuff. They're going to go buy stuff, right? That's what Facebook does. Like Oculus was bought. And what you could also do is, like, if you go to Wikipedia and just look at what they're buying, if you want to know what direction they're going in, you could just go look at the stuff that they're buying right now. What have they bought? What are they in the process of buying? Now let's add the AI layer we were talking about, right? Now, when you have AI that could come in there and you're going to get into AI investing, where they can sit there and kind of figure out, hey, go buy these companies. They could go scour the internet, scour products, look at the different patents, and then that's going to be like crazy, right? When they could start scouring the patents that are coming out, and then sit there and start piecing things together for what's needed in the future metaverse, and then they're going to sit there and start buying this stuff. The advantages that AI are going to give investors and VC firms and people like Facebook and the big players is like light years ahead of everybody else. And, things like antitrust laws are going to they have to come into play somehow into this space. That's the only way we're going to be protected. Otherwise, like, these guys are going to own the whole fucking planet.
Yeah, so Tyler, I found what I was looking for, but I think this is something that's already out there, but he just wanted to reiterate it. It just got released. He says, we just released, this is his words, we just released the 128 gigabyte Quest Q, replacing the 64 gigabyte model for $299, I guess.
Okay.
And then he says, with Elsilor, Alexa, they mentioned the smart glasses are off to a strong start.
Okay, thank you. Next up is a review. All of the new MacBook Pros, the 14-inch, 16-inch, which have the whole new M1 Pro and M1 Max processors, are getting into the hands of reviewers. And the review coming in today says Apple M1 Pro and Max review. CPU and GPU improvements offer an unparalleled combination of raw performance, unique acceleration, and power efficiency. People seem to be impressed with these new processors, is the short of it. And then Bloomberg has an article that says MasterCard partners with a startup called Bakkt, spelled BAKKT, to let banks offer cryptocurrency rewards on credit and debit card purchases. Bakkt stock closes up $30 up, which is 234% jump. The next one is the Pixel 6 Pro, because that was also an event.
Can I make a comment on that?
Of course.
Okay, yeah. So I went through the deck because I think that stock actually went from like $5 to $30. It was like phenomenal, right? Something like that, right? But one of the issues they're going to have that they didn't address is because they actually use the example of using crypto to even buy a Starbucks coffee or something. Is that, I mean, at least in the United States, okay, under our tax laws, every time you convert crypto back to cash, it's a taxable event. So everyone's ignoring that. It's going to be an issue that they don't talk about. They make it sound like it's seamless. You can just go from crypto to cash to this crypto to another crypto back to cash, and every time you're going to sell the crypto, if there's a profit, if you bought it cheaper, there's a capital gain. So that was ignored on all of that, by the way.
Okay.
But Ken, quickly, it just has to, it's a settlement. So what you're dealing with is if they did assets on taxable, if there's a bridge that can settle it later, then you don't get charged. Because eventually when crypto goes crazy or in the metaverse, it's the utility of it. As long as the settlement isn't done. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, next
Is it
up.
long term?
No. You're wrong. If you had crypto and now you don't have crypto because it's gone because, well, I kind of understand what you're saying, but I don't think the tax laws are going to work like that. But okay.
But is
And
it
I'm with
basically?
you, and I mean, we don't want to keep Tyler. I'm just clarifying. There, you see, if you go through some third-party platform, you're not selling the asset. They keep it. It's sort of an escrow, and that's what I'm alluding to.
I see what you're saying.
But is it long term capital gains or is it ordinary income? Right? Because of like.
Well, we get different, and we don't want to derail the room, but it's like it's an escrow. It's holding, so you're not doing anything, and as long as that utility, it'll cash out and settle out. But that's what that exchange or whatever this third party medium would have to do for crypto to be widespread utility. Because in the metaverse, it will be utilized, in my opinion.
But that doesn't work like that. Any other asset once the SIRS determines it's a capital asset. Well, once you use it to get something, it's you don't have it anymore. You have to account for it. So I'm not really in agreement with that. And somebody, I'm not going to mention this person's name, but someone who is a member of this group who's very knowledgeable about crypto, more so than I am, and who's a lawyer, said I was right about the tax consequences. So.
Okay.
Well, I think there'll be changes coming. That's all I'm saying. Congressional changes, but let's not stay on this. But there will be changes coming. Yeah.
Next up is reviews of the Pixel 6 Pro, which was also announced last week on Tuesday. So exactly a week ago, Google had launched their new Pixel 6 Pro, and they had a surprisingly low-budget event from their Chelsea Google store where they live streamed it and we watched it together. And the review says that it's an impressive flagship device with excellent cameras, all-day battery, and charging speeds up to 30 watts. But fingerprint sensor is not super quick. And another review says it compares it to the iPhone 13 and the Samsung Galaxy S21. It says that pictures of people with darker skin tones, most felt that Pixels were more accurate, but preferred Samsung, which is interesting because they spent an incredible amount of time in their live stream event last Tuesday highlighting the whole issue around darker skin tone photos. And considering how much time they spent on it, you would assume they've clearly have made this a huge priority, and yet people are preferring the dark skin photos from the Samsung phone, than Google's phone. The next similar review says it has fantastic cameras, great battery life, but that the system on a chip that Google made, it lags behind Qualcomm's Snapdragon 888 in multi-core tests, and in-screen fingerprint reader could be faster. So 2 of the 3 reviews highlight how the fingerprint reader is not as fast as they expect it to be. The next article is Microsoft says that Russia-backed Nobelium behind the 2020 SolarWinds hack is still targeting global IT supply chain with 14 breaches in the past few months. And that's a big concern that we talked. This headline was a top headline when we met 12 hours ago. And the New York Times headline says, ignoring sanctions, Russia renews broad cyber surveillance operation, where this is going to get very serious. This is worth putting a pin in and making note of. This could, let's hope not, this is what could trigger serious, huge problems for the planet, is Russia doing these supply chain attacks. And that's why this headline's so important, because Microsoft says, hey, we've got the data, we've got the receipts. The Russia state-backed hackers, aka the Kremlin, is hacking our key infrastructure, meaning food, water, food, energy. And this is very serious shit, because Biden has already met with Putin in person specifically to tell him, don't do this or we will reciprocate and attack you. And you can see how this can escalate out of control very quickly. That this is the type of kindling that could turn into a massive forest fire.
Especially when they start to sit there and do attacks that look like they're from a different country. So, like, like they could come in and make use servers in, let's say, the U.S. to attack, like, let's say, China or something. Then you could, man, that's going to be some crazy shit that's going to start going down.
Well, it's particularly worrisome as we go into winter, as we go into one of the first winters in this generation's history of weak supply chains around food and energy already. So, going into winter with already crippled supply chains on critical infrastructure, and you've got a country who has been weaponizing their kind of hackers in a way to attack key infrastructure, because if you were going to have hot military conflict with a country in 2021, you might be well advised to attack their water and food and energy first, digitally, because all of those things are now digital. Your water and food and energy have been digitized, just like everything else on the planet. And if those can be attacked in preparation, because your military is made up of people who need water and food, and your vehicles, your airplanes and tanks, need energy. So if you can attack the supply chains to the water and food and energy and let that problem exacerbate for 1, 2, 3 weeks, then they are at a severe disadvantage to operate militaristically. And that's why this is all worth paying very close attention to. So hold that thought. Let's see how that develops in days to come. Next article is from about Apple releases the new operating system for the iPhone 15.1 and the iPad 15.1 operating system, which comes now with SharePlay, iPhone 13 ProRes video capture, which all the video editors were eager to get their hands on, and a toggle for automatic macro mode on the phones, and vaccine cards in the wallets. And the next one from The Verge is a review of the Apple AirPods 3rd generation, which were announced at the event last week. And they say less conspicuous design, IPX4 water resistance, and improved sound quality, but spatial audio is inconsistent. And so they're generally not that impressed. The next up, BBC says that Frances Haugen...
This is your 1-minute update to remind you that I'm talking to you from a burner phone. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Sorry.
The next is from BBC. It says that Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen told the UK MPs that Facebook is unquestionably making hate worse, and warns that Instagram is more dangerous than other forms of social media. How would she know that? How would she know that Instagram's more dangerous than TikTok, for example, or Snapchat?
Which, by the way, Zuckerberg said on the call that TikTok is a real big competitor that
Mm-hmm.
he's impressed by.
Mm-hmm. But how would Frances Haugen, who's never worked at TikTok or Snapchat, know that Instagram's more dangerous than TikTok or Snapchat? What's going on there? Anyway, that's what she's telling UK members of parliament. And she says she doesn't want to hurt Facebook. But yet she's making inflammatory statements that are not based in any kind of concrete reality.
Yeah, but that's also where the politicians need to step in and ask the exact same question that you said, Tyler. How do you know? Who's
Yeah,
your source?
precisely. You're making inflammatory statements. You're making very strong suggestions that are. Do you have any evidence for that? We are lawmakers. Courts require evidence. Um, making statements that will get into the headlines and crying wolf like this will only work for so long. And this is starting to appear to be a bit narcissistic. Like she's craving the attention of her name in the headlines or something. Why would you make a statement like that? Let's see if the article has it. If they reveal any kind of evidence here. Of course, she can't have any evidence. But let's indulge. It says Miss Haugen was talking to the Online Safety Bill Committee in London. She said Facebook safety teams were under-resourced. And quote unquote, Facebook has been unwilling to accept even little slivers of profit being sacrificed for safety. And she warned that Instagram was more dangerous than other forms of social media. While other social networks were about performance, play, and exchange of ideas, Instagram is about social comparison and about bodies, about people's lifestyles. Instagram's about people's bodies. Wow. I thought it was about cat videos because that's what I see when I go to Instagram. Instagram is about social comparison and about bodies, about people's lifestyles, and that's what ends up being worse for kids, she told a joint committee of MPs and lords. She said Facebook's own research described one problem as an addict's narrative, where children are unhappy, can't control their use of the app, but feel like they cannot stop using it. Well, that's interesting because the kids are on TikTok, and TikTok has the longest session times of any app. So statistically, the data is they have longer session times on TikTok. So the facts don't really back up your claims here, Francis. I am deeply worried that it may not be possible to make Instagram safe for a 14-year-old and sincerely doubt that it is possible to make it safe for a 10-year-old, she said. The committee is fine-tuning a proposed law that will place new duties on large social networks and subject them to checks by the media regulator Ofcom. Asked if the law was keeping Mark Zuckerberg awake at night, Ms. Haugen said she was incredibly proud of the UK for taking such a world-leading stance. The UK has a tradition of leading policy in ways that are followed around the world. I can't imagine Mark is paying attention to what you're doing. British English problem. Ms. Haugen also warned that Facebook was unable to police content in multiple languages around the world, something which should worry UK officials. UK English is sufficiently different that I would be unsurprised if the safety systems that they developed primarily for American English were actually under enforcing in the UK. And she said the dangerous misinformation in other languages affects people in Britain. Those people are also living in the UK and being fed misinformation that is dangerous, that radicalizes people. Oh, that's one way to get politicians to wake up. Tell them that an app is radicalizing their population.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I think at the end of the day, the devil in the room is the algorithms. Because if you're on Instagram, there may be partial truth to that. If I search something, if I'm looking at a nail color, all I'm going to see for God knows how many days is going to be different nail colors. Or if I'm looking at a German Shepherd or cats, you said, or whatever. If I'm looking at some fashion ideas. That's all you're going to see, models and different people. That's it doesn't mean that there's nothing else but that, but the algorithms, they just flood you to death with anything and everything but that. Now it's advertising, or they're trying to sway you towards other products, other markets, other people, like-minded, whatever. Maybe there's good to that in some form, but at the other at the other spectrum of it is that it is the algorithms that is causing that. I'm in Instagram. I see what it's like. One simple search, and that's it. That's all you're going to see. If I go to search something else, every single thing I'm going to see is what I just looked at or searched or liked or whatever. So for these young children, for these young girls, that we're talking about issues with body, it is partially true. That's what they're going to see. If they look at a model, or if they look at a hairstyle idea or a makeup idea, that's all they're going to see in front of their eyes for God knows how many days until the next search. So, that's something to look at. I think if you peel the onion and go to the core, we've got issues with the algorithms, and we may have issues as far as Facebook goes. We've talked about this before with you know, the synchronization of what you see first, or the kind of friends or conversations that you've had. I mean, I think the devil in the room is algorithms, and I'm not sure how much of that is really being discussed internally. That if you fix that, you might have fixed half the problems right there.
Maybe
But
if they made
Netta,
choices like I did on Instagram, because I see a lot of ships, tanks, and airplanes.
but
Tyler, I was going
Netta,
to say, I'm not surprised that the UK minister is making the point about radicalisation right now to demonise a social media app, especially considering recently there was an attack,
Mm-hmm.
a fatal attack on a UK minister. So that's quite interesting use
Yes,
of language, quite
I
clickbaity.
thank you for that additional geographic context. Yeah, for a lot of people outside the that headline didn't really shake the world like it did inside the UK, where a member of parliament was just stabbed. Was that? Could you fill us in on the details?
I don't have too much detail on it, but yes, a member of parliament was stabbed and killed fatally in his surgery. Surgery is called basically a session of time where constituents are able to come and visit with their sort of member of parliament for the constituency or borough that they live in, and yes, he was killed, and so I'm not surprised that they're
Ah,
going to be using
and
it.
this was days ago,
Yeah,
like 4 days ago. Yeah.
we
Yeah,
call those town halls, political town
yes,
halls.
exactly. I think at least a week.
Okay. So in the past week or so, a member of parliament was murdered in a town hall, for lack of a better word, and so when she says that this app is radicalizing your citizens, it's a little bit stronger than it normally would be in this context.
Absolutely, especially considering that it's such a key word right now.
Right. So that's an incredibly strong statement to make, given the recent headlines there, the recent tragedy. Honestly, wow, that's some real. And she, of course, has no concrete evidence of that. So this is she has two separate, really inflammatory, unprovable statements that she's making here.
Absolutely, and it's so emotive right now. So it's in all the headlines. Ministers, other government officials are still sort of speaking up about it. So from a strategic perspective, I think it's clever to be using this. It's very triggering for sure.
Wow.
and the
Okay.
same thing though happened a few years ago to a minister in the UK that was killed by one
But
of his
no ministers were
constituents.
ever killed before Facebook, right? I mean, this is clearly people were never stabbed before Facebook. So this is clearly Facebook's responsibility, right? I mean, we have life before and after Facebook. Everything that happens after Facebook, the good things that happened, we're not worried about giving Facebook credit for that. We're going to focus on everything negative that ever happened after Facebook. And clearly, post Facebook, if something happens, they do have 3.5 billion users, and they need to be responsible for everything those people say and do. Right? I mean, that's just basic math. I mean, people are becoming. They're becoming diabetic. You got the opium crisis. You've got all kinds of tragedies happening around the planet in this post-Facebook world. Has anyone noticed this? I think Facebook has a lot to answer for. So,
Tyler, I have a question.
yes.
So, according to Francis Hogan's accusation, so if Facebook really have the responsibility to regulate or police, but doesn't that mean it empowers Facebook more if they really have this power to regulate or delete any violate any replies or articles that are violating some rules, but who's gonna regulate these rules? Just like we discussed the mask problems, Chris said if you don't provide a suitable method for those to set you violate the mask wearing mandate, then
Right. Well, it's going to
there's no use.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's going to get really interesting tomorrow because tomorrow TikTok appears before the U.S. Senate subcommittee, and let's see what's revealed in that hearing, and let's see what the headlines look like out of there because people have actually died doing TikTok challenges, namely the Benadryl challenge. People have broken their necks doing the milk crate challenge. People have been young students are now permanently in jail for slapping their teachers. So let's see what headlines come out of and these are very real incidences with actual names. So let's see what the headlines and the testimony looks like tomorrow. I'm very interested to see what comes out of that hearing and what, more importantly, what the headlines will be. So the next one is the Redbox, the DVD rental and streaming company, goes public on NASDAQ due to a SPAC. Okay, and then Bloomberg says they have sources at the U.S. Treasury to give the SEC considerable concessions for regulating stablecoins like Tether in a report later this week. Hotel booking startup called Selfbook raises $25 million from Tiger Global. El Salvador's crypto wallet called the Chivo wallet removes a feature that let day traders make rapid profits by freezing Bitcoin's price for a minute before an order. Teachment, which helps teachers create their own virtual classrooms using their phones, raises $78 million. Nigeria's central bank launches the e-Naira digital currency in partnership with payments company Bit and has minted 500 million coins worth $1.2 million. Berlin-based low-code data management service called Y42 raises $31 million from Atomico. LA-based esports collective FaZe Clan decides to go public through a SPAC, valuing the company at $1 billion. So another unicorn for LA. And there's your big headlines for today. Let me refresh just to make sure. Yep, nothing new. Okay, now we get into the tweets. And as I promised you, we have some unusually good tweets today. So, like this one that somebody sent in here from Palmer Luckey. And Palmer Luckey took to Twitter to share something quite interesting. And for those who don't know, Palmer Luckey was the creator of Oculus, which he sold to Facebook when he was, 25 years old or something like that. And now Palmer has a new company called Anduril, which is playing a very key role in protecting America's borders with drones. And he's found a much, much, much cheaper way to do what the government used to do. The Department of Defense spends a lot of money doing security. And he figured out a way to do it at a way less price. So when he's bidding against, Northrop Grumman and, the traditional big defense contractors, he's able to underbid them by a substantial margin. And he's getting a whole lot of Department of Defense money to use more modern technologies to, do things like border surveillance and protection and whatnot. Now, he took to Twitter to say, I recently spent 2 weeks in federal court successfully defending myself from someone who tried to turn my willingness to help out a fellow VR community member into $1 billion payday. You don't know this because nobody's reporting on the unanimous jury verdict. So why has not a single publication reported on he's wondering why is the press completely radio silent on this $1 billion, attempt to, sue him in court, and he wins unanimously and whatnot. He says, not even the tech reporters who were literally sitting in the courtroom as the verdict was read wrote anything. One can only conclude that the media apparatus around this case was only interested in reporting an outcome where Palmer, Facebook, Oculus lose. And he's exactly right. They're not reporting in this case because Palmer was Oculus, sold it to Facebook. It's related to Facebook. He said it would be one thing if this a hastily dismissed claim, but it was a multi-week jury trial in federal court that included witnesses like John Carmack and Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark Zuckerberg was a witness in the trial. The only two things penetrating the blackout are this tweet. He said, the only coverage was a tweet from law360.com where it says jury clears Oculus founder and Facebook unit of IP theft claims. A federal jury on Wednesday cleared Oculus VR's founder and Facebook subsidiary of, this $1 billion lawsuit. And he's exactly right. The tech journalists were in the courtroom and were all too eager to pounce if it turned out they were to lose that $1 billion suit. An interesting tweet there. So I just tweeted that one out from Palmer. And then we get into this one from The Verge, which says, no, we covered that one. The next one's from The Guardian. And The Guardian headline from the UK reads, "Our society is troubled. Beware those who blame it on big tech." And this, now you're starting to see the difference between UK and US corporate media, where the US media is on their jihad against Facebook and the UK media isn't. The European media isn't, because Europeans understand, you know what, we're responsible people and adults. We're responsible for what we consume and the bad things that happen. And Facebook is trash and Instagram's trash and all the social media is trash. And if you consume that stuff endlessly, you will get mental diabetes and become emotionally obese. We know that because we're adults here over here in Europe. We take responsibility for ourselves. So the EU press can't really go on this tirade against Facebook because the EU readers would be like, are you fucking crazy? So the article says, every time a dramatic, unforeseen political event happens, there follows a left field fixation that some out-of-control technology created it. Whether this fear about big tech comes around, whenever this fear about big tech comes around, we are told that something new, even more toxic, has infiltrated our public discourse, triggering hatred towards politicians and public figures, conspiracy theories about COVID, and even major political events like Brexit. The concern over anonymity online becomes a particular worry, as if ending it will somehow, like throwing a blanket at a raging house fire, subdue our fevered state. You may remember that during the summer onslaught of racist abuse towards black players in the England football team, instead of reckoning with the fact that racism still haunts this country, we busied ourselves with bluster about how cowards online would be silenced if we only just demanded they identify themselves. We resort to this explanation that shadowy social media somehow stimulate our worst impulses, despite there being little evidence that more abuse is from unidentifiable sources. After England's defeat in the Euro 2020 final, Twitter revealed that 99% of the abuse on its site directed at England footballers was not anonymous. The same arguments were made in the aftermath of MP David Ames's killing, that doing something about online abuse would make politicians safer. It was a rehash of the 2018 moment when Theresa May pledged to regulate online behavior because of a tone of bitterness and aggression has entered into our public debate. Good old social media, always there to paper over the giant cracks of our political failures. Bad tech is a convenient fall guy for a whole gang of perpetrators. It has been particularly useful in recent years when Brexit has enabled right-wing politicians and press to engage in the most divisive, dangerous rhetoric, particularly towards the country's political and legal institutions, then point to social media when the rhetoric serves its purpose of eroding tolerance and trust. But when Parliament and the Supreme Court, attacked by the media and politicians who variously being for variously being saboteurs, traitors, and opponents of the will of the people come under fire from members of the public, this is an entirely different matter. The faceless public becomes the only protagonist. This allows everyone from the mainstream press to publishers of far-right conspiracy theories to distance themselves from the scene of the crime and innocently propose earnest-sounding solutions to our country's crisis of racism and loss of faith in our politics. The corrupting influence of technology companies is also a compelling explanation for them because it means that something can be done. This is partly down to the sort of dominant liberal technocratic sensibilities that reaches for a toolkit to fix social and political problems as one would approach a broken machine. The result is solutionism. The belief there is a technological remedy. The belief is that there is a technological remedy for most issues because human behavior is essentially rational and can be mapped out, analyzed, and judged or adjusted. Solutionism. Interesting point.
Damn good article.
Yes, I would echo that. Is just beautiful, especially from the tech side. It's
Who
where we
wrote
can
that?
get caught up in one side or the other because there is, no solution, no technical solution for human behavior.
There you
But you
wow.
just want to.
Whoa. I love how you just said that, LS. Okay, so the next up is from Evan. That restaurants, it's a headline from CNBC. Restaurants prepare for long-term labor crunch by turning to what?
Robots.
Yes. Robots. CNBC headline. Restaurants prepare for long-term labor crunch by turning to robots to work the fryer, shuttle food to tables. Restaurants and ghost kitchen companies are testing out different robotic and automated technology solutions to speed up service and solve for ongoing labor challenges. Companies such as Miso Robotics and Rich Tech are developing automated bots for both restaurant kitchens and dining rooms. Economists say the labor challenge will be prolonged and that robotics can help to ease the crunch but can't fully replace humans. Economists don't really have a clue how this is going to play out, apparently. At Inspire Brands Innovation Center in Atlanta, the Flippy robot is taking on a new challenge. The automated worker made by Miso Robotics first came onto the scene as a burger station. Now it's frying wings for the first time. The bots, known as Flippy 1 and 2, have been in development for nearly 5 years, taking on pilots at brands such as Cali Burger and White Castle. The wings iteration is being tested at Buffalo Wild Wings brand as a way to ramp up production and speed. The hope is to scale up its usage in 2022 and beyond. Our strategy and vision for automation at Inspire is really not about the labor shortage. It is all about how we increase our capacity, says Stephanie Sintel, SVP of Restaurant Operations. The automation that we are looking at will allow us to unlock that and provide faster food to our guests.
So
Just
Tyler,
wait.
as you're noting that these are being used in ghost kitchens, so they're actually being used across chains and restaurants. So it's actually a lot more prevalent and a lot more profitable. You're figuring out once for 5 chains or once for 5 franchises, right?
Well, the ones who adopt the robots are going to have an advantage over the ones who don't, and this is going to go
Right.
faster than people think. Yeah.
And I mean, don't just think like as you're saying, like White Castle or whoever using it. You're looking at ghost kitchens who serve or are the back ends for a lot of restaurants.
Well, I know that I had heard that in food and bev, they're definitely testing bartending, and anybody in the restaurant business knows there's a lot of slippage in the alcohol. So there's a lot of profit room there.
The other issue, Tyler, and I think I've mentioned it before, is especially in these ghost kitchens, when you have a trailer, at least in the county of Los Angeles, you need to have a bathroom within a certain amount of feet because you need a hand washing and a restroom. If you have a robot, really eliminates that need and really changes the game as far as health inspection and stuff like that. So they are forward looking in this and really realizing, unfortunately, humans introduce an element that requires more cooperation from, restaurants, other businesses to use some of their resources. So
the company also has a hospitality robot for cleaning and foresees opportunities ahead in airports and even senior living facilities, as the labor shortage is expected to continue for years to come. Robotics usage also extends beyond just in-house operations for food companies. Ghost and virtual kitchen companies are also leaning into using robots to deliver food to customers. Kitchen United this week launched a 5-day pilot program using the KiwiBot to take restaurant orders from its site at the Westfield Valley Fair Mall in the Bay Area to homes within half-mile radius. Reef Virtual Kitchens has a similar program with Cartken in Miami. Fast food companies Domino's and Chipotle are both involved with SoftBank-backed Nuro. Domino's launched a pilot in Houston with Nuro's autonomous car this past spring, and Chipotle disclosed in March it had made an investment in Nuro as part of its funding round in late 2020. Okay.
They're actually gonna get really smart too, right? And imagine if if it takes 15 minutes to deliver your pizza and 12 minutes to bake it. That's 27 minutes in a traditional delivery sense, but it's 15 minutes if you pop it in and bake it on the way. So I'll shut up.
So check out the next article. I just tweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. Donish sent this in. I saw it as well. This is like one of the perhaps more important tweets anyone's twatted in the past 24 hours, which is from Balaji, who used to work at Andreessen Horowitz. He's an Uber geek. Used to be the CTO at Coinbase, for example. And he jumps in on this debate between Jack Dorsey and Cathie Wood, where Jack said hyperinflation's coming and Cathie says, I don't think so. And he says both are right in different ways. Everything technology disrupts will see prices fall. Everything the state subsidizes will see prices rise, like the graph below. And he shows a graph that I just tweeted that you must see. This might be the most important graph you will see in months to come, or in the past many months, where it shows which things have gotten more expensive and which things have gotten cheaper since 1998 till now. And it shows the price increase and decrease of lots of items. For example, what has increased the most is hospital services. It's gone up about 225%. Second is college tuitions and fees, which has gone up about 175%. College textbooks have gone up 150. Childcare and nursery school has gone up about 125, etc. Now, some things have gone down, like televisions have dropped dramatically, like nearly 100%. Computer software, wireless telephone services, household furnishings, etc. And he makes the point that the things that are going down in price are things where the geeks get involved and tech gets involved and starts innovating. And the things where prices go up, like hospitals, healthcare, like education, are the things where the government is in control and the geeks are not there. So hold that thought in mind and do check out the graph if you can while I read his little tweet thread, because a couple of light bulbs will likely go on here, where he says, the problem is that the state controls much of the physical world, housing, education, and healthcare, but also ports, utilities, and police. So the next costs after soaring rent and medical expenses will be supply chain shocks, power outages, and spending on crime mitigation, because those are things that the government controls. So those things are going to continue to get more and more and more expensive. Policing, power, anything to do with power, because that's government related. Supply chain issues, again, very government related. And all those things will continue to get more and more expensive until, like college tuitions, they become ridiculous. And you get power outages. The next in the tweet thread says, the state actively prevents automation in the sectors it controls, which is why things continue to get more expensive. The cost disease doesn't happen by accident. Arguments vary. Sometimes it's safety. Sometimes it's explicitly about protecting jobs. But there's a reason you don't have free AI medical imaging on your phone. And let me mute Mabwana and Shane here for a second. Okay. At the same time, We are seeing the rapid advance of technology in the digital realm. AI will go everywhere. Everything you can deliver on a screen or through a device will get very cheap through the continued supply of devices, though the continued supply of devices is a function of the US-China relationship. In the bad scenario, that means we may be on track, in the US at least, for a Ready Player One world. Everything physical is extremely expensive or unavailable. Everyone lives as much life as possible through a screen or headset as the digital world is affordable and functional. We saw a possible preview of this during the early days of COVID, when at first everyone was locked down looking at their phones, and then they were outside fighting each other. Combine those two and you have a recipe where people stay indoors and online to avoid the anarchy. Again, this is a bad outcome, not guaranteed. Tech is the scenario. Tech in this scenario isn't the cause of the problem. It's the workaround for a failed state. And that's a really interesting comment. Got Jennifer's mic open. So again, tech in this scenario isn't the cause of the problem. Tech is the workaround for a failed state, just like other cities benefited from tech and didn't end up like San Francisco. Other countries will do fine without ending up like the US may end up. So the US is currently on track for a world where everything physical that can possibly be replaced by a cheap digital alternative is. For example, flights will become Zoom calls, workers will become AIs, much socialization will become social networks, and everything physical that can't be so digitized gets expensive. So what is another possible scenario? Fundamentally, the federal government has declining state capacity. It is losing control of events at home and abroad. If it can no longer control a U.S. state's internal decisions, that state could take a new path on, say, healthcare and energy. And then he highlights the things the federal government is losing control over, both domestic and international affairs, such as inflation, Afghanistan, China and Taiwan, France with regard to the AUKUS, El Salvador and Bitcoin, 17 states on education, Texas abortion and vaccines, Germany on Nord Stream 2, Florida on financial surveillance. Then he says here's the last tweet. There is a third and not wholly orthogonal scenario where tech manages to bridge more innovation to the physical world via robotics. But so long as the failed state runs the physical world, any resulting cost efficiencies will be eroded, or robots won't even be allowed. Really interesting point. So we got Shahin. I invited you on stage, by the way, and Jonathan, I just invited you as well. So I just shared that interesting thought tweet thread from Balaji. The next is from JT.
Tyler, can I just say that the post is interesting, especially given his position in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Mm-hmm.
I think hyperinflationary is a little bit sensational. Certainly, there's going to be high inflation, but also he doesn't sort of touch on the narrative that sort of, technology allows a greater concentration of wealth in fewer hands. So these are points that he doesn't like to touch on. So I think the narrative very much suits his purpose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So did you notice Jack says that hyperinflation is happening very concretely, right? In his tweet?
Inflation is definitely out of control. I mean, it's driven by two factors principally. The first being energy, and the second being, commodities.
I agree.
So rare earth metals or steel, magnesium, copper.
Yeah, I think
we
more
now
so
just
energy.
have sort of, peak demand and diminishing supply. These are all, resources that are finite.
Yes.
But Jonathan Wood discusses that there's going to be deflation. Did you know that in that article as a counterbalance?
I haven't seen that, no.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can share the link with me.
Kathy's argument is that she thinks the velocity, kind of like trade volume on a stock, is so low that it's kind of a false signal, essentially, is her point.
So you always get an inflationary environment where you have limited supply.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you look at the world trade figures, the 20% increase in global demand from pre-pandemic levels, and that's just this year. Shortage of supply, shortage of energy. We transitioned to renewables too quickly, and we started to decommission all of our fossil fuel capability. too quickly.
Right.
So it's all come together in, I hate the analogy, but a perfect storm. And the central banks, before, when it was a financial collapse or disaster or lack of confidence, they could just print money and they could artificially keep inflation down. But now, if you've got inflation in energy, inflation in commodities, you get price discovery. And that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing real price discovery for the first time in probably 20 years. And I am an optimist. I live my life on hope for the future, but it comes at the worst time because, as we're trying to reduce our effect on the planet, of course, it's kicked in with a vengeance. And now we're having to, we are in effect going backwards. So an
But
inflationary, I wouldn't say hyperinflationary environment is very bad for
Yep.
our environment. It's
Yep.
not only bad for the economy and for us, all of us individually, because it steals money out of your pocket. It's very bad for the environment because it means we're going backwards. More coal has been brought online in China, I think, than in the last 10 years. In the last 3 months, they've put out a call in the north where China has large coal reserves to mine 12 million tons a month additional. To put that into perspective, basically that's Glencore, one of the world's largest miners of coal traditionally. That's their output in a 3-month period. So China is producing that output on a monthly basis. It's their yearly output in a 3-month period. So China is producing the amount of coal Glencoe produces annually every 3 months now, and that's additional. It's the additional demand that they've asked for.
Yeah.
So this is it's a really complex situation, and of course the central bankers, they have no tools. They're impotent to do anything to change this, and they're sitting back. And now you're seeing transitory inflation become inflation, and states stepping in to try and cap power prices. But of course, if you do that, you decimate the actual private sector that operates those businesses. We're seeing in the UK. We saw in France, I think yesterday, another big retail energy provider went to the wall. I think we've had something like 15 energy providers in the last 12 months in the UK go bust. It's
But
really complex,
Jonathan,
really
if I could
difficult.
just add just a cap on the other side, Wood's whole discussion, and I'm with you on both sides. I do agree with you, is that AI and technologies can compensate this deflationary thing, where there's efficiencies, which is touching on the article because I agree where governments have mandated certain industries and so forth. There just always has to be that check and balance. But if you talk about like the trucking and supply shipping issue, there is robots, tests being done at Caltech in Pasadena, California, where a robot with drone technology can walk a tightrope. And PhD people have already proven this. So if we were to roll out these things where instead of an autonomous vehicle driving a truck, you have humans, but you also have robotics that can do it so that they don't rest. And we can perfect this technology. You can have that hybrid system where it works. But I think to Tyler's point and other points earlier in the article, there's this yin yang or just opposite division that's creating destruction on one side or the other. I think that's where Wood was saying there'll be this, these efficiencies that can be done by technology will improve the world. And I agree, it can be concentrated in too many little hands. But then on the other side, you just let the whole damn thing fall apart. So both are bad.
Yeah, I agree. But if you look at Chandler, who wrote about this back in the 70s, as you move to a more automated system, your power requirements go up. So, there will be a cost of greater automation, and that is basically more input power. And we will become more efficient, and therefore less people will be needed. So, there are real societal and human issues here that I agree you can't stand in the way. I'm not advocating that, technology is definitely a way out of this problem, but it needs to be managed in such a well-balanced manner And what are we going to do? Are we going to pay everybody a living wage even if they don't work? And where is the
Nope.
investment in retraining people? So government policy needs to be more expansive in regards to its society. At the moment, government policy is very much focused on businesses are failing, or I'm not going to get re-elected, so therefore I need to provide money to my people. So you see sort of central banks and politicians, if you like, putting lipstick on the pig. They don't actually solve the real problems. They try and throw money at it.
The
The
And
thing
real
that
Jonathan, I'll
I'm
back
trying to
channel you
say
because
here is you
I
can't
agree
throw
with that.
money at this anymore.
And I agree with you 100% about, the digital divide in the African American community in the U.S. are all disenfranchised communities. So I'll back channel you because I agree 100% that this tech should be for everyone, not just to let the rich get richer and watch a certain part of society just keep going down, down, down. So I agree with you 100%.
Okay, let's go on here. We got headline from CNN says that the Facebook papers may be the biggest crisis in Facebook's history. Facebook has confronted whistleblowers, PR firestorms, and congressional inquiries in recent years, but now it faces a combination of all three at once in what might be the biggest crisis in the company's history. Dun, dun, dun. And the stock went up. Nice try, media. You're exposing your death rattle as we go into the metaverse and a future of AI assistants who read us the news based on everything they've sucked up on your websites and read it to us without
Tyler,
the clickbait headlines.
did you see that Facebook had earmarked, I think, $45 billion for share buybacks?
Yes, 50.
Yeah. So maybe they don't feel as confident as in their long-term sort of growth as, they're going to buy the dip here. Every time their share gets affected, they're going to, which is obviously, if you believe in the business, also a wise investment, but it also helps to distort the natural price.
Yeah, but I think they're very confident in their transition to a metaverse and social commerce, where they're now bringing social commerce to Instagram and WhatsApp and the Blue app, and bringing social commerce of competing with Amazon. That's $1 trillion opportunity that they are uniquely positioned to capitalize on. That means Instagram will be a whole lot about buying and not just clicking little hearts. You'll be clicking buy buttons. That means a whole lot more new revenue, whole new revenue streams. So the CSQ, which is Sharon, tweeted this one from the Global Times of China. Global Times is a CCP paper, the largest in China, and their headline's kind of interesting. It says that the latest COVID resurgence in China triggered by new imported Delta variant source. Current wave spreads to 11 provinces in the past week. The latest COVID resurgence, which has spread into 11 Chinese provinces in just 1 week, was triggered by a new imported source identified as being of Delta variant. They believe it's Delta Plus, according to officials from China's top health authority. Some Chinese epidemiologists see the current sporadic outbreaks hit the largest scale since the epidemic flare-up in Nanjing in late July. That was the worst since 2020 outbreak in Wuhan, Hubei. However, if anti-epidemic measures are effectively implemented and loopholes are fixed, the latest outbreaks can be brought under control. Let's hope so.
Tyler,
Yeah, this
they already authorized the Sinovac to be able to use under at the age above 3. So I think maybe because of the Winter Olympics, so we are vaccinate more and more people. So that means above 3, so the kids can be vaccinated.
Okay. So next up is this one from JT, highlighting the new Quest headset controllers and charging dock possibly revealed in leaked videos. And this is Facebook Oculus Quest. They have their annual flagship event on Thursday, where it's rumored they might even change the entire name of Facebook itself. And of course, they're going to highlight all the hot new stuff in their whole new metaverse VR world, which is the Oculus Quest headset. Which is, for those who missed the massive headline in recent weeks that Mark Zuckerberg himself says they're going to push Facebook into be a metaverse company. So Oculus will be the primary focus rather than the Blue app. Or the Blue app will somehow merge with Oculus. The next one's from Evan, and it's from the Daily Mail, that Facebook employees tried to suppress conservative news outlets. The Facebook employees urged the company to remove Breitbart from its news tab, according to internal documents, but leaders at the company were concerned about this thing called freedom of speech or something. Yeah, apparently Facebook's said, you know what, that's nice that you don't like Breitbart. You're kind of far right and you want to silence news outlets on the far. You're far left and you want to silence the news outlets and people on the far right, but that's unfortunate because there's this thing called freedom of speech. And we realize that you think far right media content is dangerous. We get that. But the founding fathers of America believed in this bizarre concept called freedom of speech. So we're going to go ahead and let the people speak. And already the far right already is accusing us of silencing them because, we removed the president. Right. So that's why they're creating their own new competitor, their own new social network called Truth Social, because we're silencing them already. And so the left-leaning media is upset that the left-leaning employees at Facebook tried to do the right thing and silence the right-side media, and Facebook didn't agree to it because Facebook's a platform, and they have to be friendly with both sides, and yet they're in the impossible position of already being accused of silencing the right, and of course, now we know why they're silencing the right. They have employees inside trying to silence people on the right. So, next up is this one from CNN, that the Sudan Prime Minister's house has been surrounded and top government officials reportedly arrested. And this was huge news breaking when we met 12 hours ago, that there's been a military coup in Sudan. And the Prime Minister's house has been surrounded and top government officials have been arrested. And what's interesting about this, that the mainstream media is not going to report to you, is something, that we have a unique position to be able to do here at Tech News Around the World, because we have people from all over the planet, like Messi, who's just down the road there in Ethiopia. And there were statements made by all kinds of big political parties and figures and countries and prime ministers about this military coup in Sudan. And give me 1 second while I kill that article. And what's interesting is how people responded, how these big groups responded to this military coup. And there's something very interesting. I wonder if you can figure out what's interesting about these responses to this military coup. The headline says, utterly unacceptable. World reacts to the Sudan coup. Governments and human rights groups demand the immediate release of the Sudanese civilian political leaders and condemn apparent coup attempt. Let me read that again nice and slow. Governments and human rights groups demand the immediate release of the Sudanese prime minister. That's true, as you're about to find out. Although one major group is not asking for the immediate release of the Sudanese prime minister. I wonder if you can guess who it is. So, here we go. Here are your choices. You got the United States, the African Union, the United Nations, the European Union, Amnesty International, Egypt, which is their neighbor, just the north of Sudan, Ethiopia, their neighbor to the south, Saudi Arabia, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, China, and the Norwegian Refugee Council. Which one of those, all of them except for one, says you must release the prime minister now? That's their first opening statement. One of them does not say that at all. One of them is not even encouraging the release of the prime minister and is in fact doing a bit of the opposite and saying, You guys should cooperate, and you should discuss things.
China.
China, of course.
Notice the person from Africa in the country next door, as usual, has the right answer and is even laughing because it's so obvious. And here's why. And the mainstream media is not reporting this. None of the media you're going to see is reporting this, but people in Africa know this as their ground truth lived experience. That China has an interest in, and it's very possible that why is this military coup doing this, and who's supporting them? Well, we could look at Myanmar, where they recently had a military coup, and who supported them. And if you ask the people in Myanmar, they will tell you, just as Messi was just saying, that China supported the military coup in Myanmar. Why? Because they have interests in Africa and they have interests in Southeast Asia, in Myanmar. Because they have big oil pipelines, big hydroelectric dams on the Irrawaddy River that they spent billions of dollars on. And when the democratically elected government came into power, the democratically elected government said, we don't like China's big hydroelectric dam. The people don't want it. We don't like these big oil pipelines. We shut them down. We don't like all this Chinese influence in our country. Get it out. And what do you know? Magic presto, military coup comes in just days after mysterious airplanes were arriving in Mandalay, the capital of Myanmar, without their signals on, hidden in the dark of night. And when the journalist had photographs of these flights from Beijing to and from Mandalay and confronted them and said, what are these mysterious flights bringing in pallets of something? They said, oh, we're just buying shrimp. Ah, right. So that's why you turned off your airplane identifiers and flew undercover. Right. 24 hours before the military coup started. Right, of course. So this military coup happening in Sudan, gee, I wonder what might be behind this, because China's got a whole lot of economic interest and investments in Sudan, which the current government, where they were trying to build a democratic government, nearly identical to what happened in Myanmar, they know that if that democratically elected government comes into power in Sudan, their investments will likely be pushed aside, just as it was happening in Myanmar, which they just corrected by supporting the military coup in Myanmar. So this military coup in Sudan, I wonder who's behind it. It's a real puzzle. It's a real mystery. But no one's reporting that. But people on the ground know what's going on. And what you're going to see is what happened precisely in Myanmar. The locals who knew what happened will start attacking the Chinese infrastructure in the country, just as they're doing in Myanmar, just as they will do in Sudan. Because the locals know what happened, who's pushing this military coup, who's disrupting their fledgling democracy. And now you know why, of all of the comments from all of these sources, the US, the African Union, the United Nations, the European Union, Amnesty International, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Germany, France, etc., United Kingdom, are all saying you must release the prime minister now. All of them. Except for China. China's the only one not saying that. And now you know why. China doesn't want the prime minister released. China, in fact, is pushing the military coup.
I think the only good news is that if there is any, is all African leaders are actually siding on the anti-coup. You know, the African Union, even Ethiopia here, or Egypt, and all of them are supporting, you know, the non-military civilian leadership that the Sudanese have been demanding since the, you know, the fall of al-Bashir. And you know, there has been transition government. There has been you know, the military trying to take power long time ago. They have been pushing and shoving for power, but this is a good news and good development in Africa, where they are trying to stop coups happening and you know, just siding with the drives of and the interests of the people on the ground, and people are out on the road and protesting and demanding, because the transitional government was trying to hand over to civilian leadership in a week or two, and that was that's I guess what pushed the military to just jump on and take action, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so now next up, I have three interesting headlines that actually connect these three little puzzle pieces, which seem to not connect. Let's see if you can figure out how they connect. Watch this. Here's the first of the three. From the New Yorker: Life in the fantastic world of the Facebook metaverse. Nazi propaganda, fraud, imagery with visible human female nipples. There was danger around every corner. From the New Yorker. Let's read that one again. Life in the fantastic world of the Facebook metaverse. Nazi propaganda, fraud, imagery with visible human female nipples. There was danger around every corner. The metaverse hasn't even really started yet, and we have the New Yorker painting a picture that the Facebook metaverse is an Auschwitz death camp. Right? Everyone got clear on that? Their first description, their first adjective, the first adjective that they chose to use in describing Facebook's metaverse is Nazi propaganda. Hold that thought. Article number 2. New York Times. Inside the big Facebook leak. In a time of mega leaks, journalists' sources have become power players. Frances Haugen, the former Facebook executive, is the new whistleblower, and inside the big Facebook leak, in a time of mega leaks, journalists' sources have become power players. Journalists' sources have become power players. Okay? Number 3, New York Times. Do you work at Amazon or another powerful employer? We're interested in learning as much as possible about how employers manage their workforces. As Amazon is on a path to becoming the nation's largest employer, we have been reporting on how it manages its vast workforce. We'd like to deepen our knowledge of the employment model and practices at Amazon. If you have knowledge related to this topic as a worker, contractor, manager, human resources staff, or executive, please share it with us below. Your response will help us shape our follow-up reporting. Please be as specific as possible and include as many details as you can. Written evidence, if you have it, is extremely helpful. What?
God, they're chasing accidents like a bad lawyer.
And here's the first, it's a survey, and the first question is, what workplace practices at Amazon do you think we should know about? Or outside of Amazon? Can you provide specific examples of workplace practices the New York Times should look into?
Actually working.
I've got news to share. New York Times. They're replacing us with robots. Yes, I'm an Amazon employee, and we tried to unionize, and now they just launched a whole new factory, completely automated.
I just wish some of these tech companies would finally get the backbone like some of the old companies did, because right now they're not suing some of these people, organizations that are doing things that many companies that I dealt with in the past would have sued a long time ago. I'm just amazed. They're just too soft for my liking. Hopefully they get a backbone.
But Robert, I think there's such a transitional shift right now. And a lot of these media companies know what's coming. They like Tyler said, they know that they're in the graveyard already, and the metaverse and tech and everything else will transition the world. But there still needs to be the balance that I think Jonathan mentioned earlier of human value and where we place in that. And politicians are trying to, in my opinion, sort of, placate to either side of whatever their base is and whatever their stronghold comes from. And this is in Ethiopia, as Missy knows, because my son's from Ethiopia. But you see this in Africa, and some of them are trying to get from under this, because China will, with Belt and Road, will control most of Africa if they continue the way they are. And so the African people need to step up on that. But then that also is global as well. So it's just a yin yang. And I'm in tech. I'm in that 5G. I'm in that world. I'm building this
So,
world. But
Tyler,
I know the balance of it.
I think that the New York Times piece, or the survey of people that work at Amazon, could also have another angle, because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, right? So I mean, I think that there's definitely the tech angle, but then you have two competing papers as well. So yeah, again, not knowing, what might be happening behind the
Mm.
scenes, but I do think that that's something that we consider
You
in this
just brought up an
discussion.
interesting idea. If Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, what would happen if Mark Zuckerberg bought the New York Times and Elon Musk bought the Wall Street Journal?
To be fair, Tyler, this could be like, debatable, but a lot of reputable Wall Street Journal reporters and as well as independent reviewers have been saying that really the Wall Street Journal, even though bought by Bezos, has been really
Washington Post.
independent.
Yeah.
The Washington Post has been really independent and he has absolutely no role in the editorial activities. In
Sure.
fact, they cited as an example, for example, when he got involved in that private problem with blackmailing and divorce process, they said that the Washington Post did actually write critical things or even reported the way they would report like anything else. So, it depends. If Zuckerberg is buying something else to control it, that's another story. But what they are saying is that it was a strategic just buying because Washington Post needed the cash injection, and he thought that that was the thing to do. And a lot of, from what we see so far, that they say he has absolutely no interference. So.
And I just wanted to clarify, and I don't think that you were insinuating this, Messy, but I did not want that to be the connection. In fact, one of my best friends is a journalist at the Washington Post, and I've followed her career over the past 20 years, including when she was the youngest and first New York or American journalist in Iraq during the Second Gulf War. And so not only is she a good person, but I know that she's all about her craft. So I didn't want to insinuate that there was bias, but I just think from a strategic, competitive standpoint, that could be an angle that could be playing out.
But Lakeisha, also one other point quickly, it could actually make it better because the spotlight's on these people versus we don't really know who's controlling these other medias, as Tyler's talking about, like the Wall Street Journal. Who's really behind funding all of these things against Facebook? As an example, and it's good. It should just be
It was revealed. It was
non-biased.
Pierre
Yeah.
Omidyar is funding Frances Haugen.
Oh.
So the next one, but then she says yesterday in the UK about her finances, I invested in Bitcoin very early, so I'm all good. If that's the case, why are you taking money from Pierre Omidyar?
Exactly.
Anywho.
But also, to be fair, the CTO resigned as well, right? So we know that. I mean, he is a very high up person. When these scandals start coming out, he did resign.
Yes. We're not aware of any other resignations, though.
Right, but he was a very high-profile person who did resign. So it's not like
over the course of 3 months, it's statistically expected that somebody might resign in the course of 3 months. The longer that we go without another resignation, the less it seems that it's necessarily causal. I agree that it seems causal. If there had been additional resignations, then it would add credence to that causal.
And just a quick point, Tyler. A couple of years ago, I think, Missy, just so you know, several top people left Facebook, if I'm correct. And Tyler, you might know better. Like 2 years ago, like 3 or 4 of his top colleagues were just bouncing. They were resigning and leaving. And I thought there was something wrong with the company back then, but this is at least 2 or 3 years ago. Some of his top people for product development, I'm talking about very close to Mark. And right around when Cheryl's husband was killed in Mexico, Sheryl Sandberg, her COO, she's remarried now, but it was around that timeline. That's all I'm saying.
So the next article is I Told You So. Poland to increase troop numbers on the Belarus border to around 10,000. Can anyone guess why?
Immigration. Illegal immigration. Belarus.
Is
Russia.
that
That's
the
all I'll
illegal
say. I
immigration
can't say
issue?
too much more about that because
Man,
I have people there.
in this
I
case,
think
Illegal
that's
immigration.
it
the
says
illegal
Afghanistan.
immigration issue.
it says Poland is increasing the number of troops on its border with Belarus to around 10,000. Its defense minister said on Monday as the country tries to stem a surge of migration, which it blames on Belarus. Hundreds of people from places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa have been trying to cross the border illegally every day, and Poland has beefed up security in the region, brushing aside criticism that it is treating the migrants inhumanely. We are increasing the number of soldiers helping the border guard by 2,500. Soon, about 10,000 soldiers will be watching over security of the border. The border guard said that over the weekend, groups of about 60 or 70 immigrants or migrants had twice attempted to force their way through the border, and two Polish soldiers had been injured. As a result of these events, two Polish soldiers were hospitalized. One of them was hit in the face with a stone, the other with a branch. These people are not in any danger. They have left the hospital. The European Commission and Warsaw say the flow of migrants has been orchestrated by Belarus in a bid to put pressure on the European Union over sanctions it imposed on Belarus. Poland has declared a state of emergency in the region and plans to build a wall on the border. The Polish parliament has also passed legislation that human rights advocates say aims to legalize pushbacks of migrants across its border in breach of the country's commitments under international law. And now you've got this major conflict between Poland and the EU.
And Hungary recently patted them on the back too. So there's going to be more people that are going to be backing Poland from the Eastern Bloc.
Yeah. And so, because Poland, for those who don't know, is, and let's get Magda or Maria, or Magda would be ideal because I think she's still on the ground there. It's a very strong anti-immigration sentiment. So, I mean, more than people would assume in Poland at the moment. This is one of their political hot issues of the moment. Magda, can you make a comment about that?
Yeah, right now it's so like the whole thing. I missed what you guys were saying because I was in the lift, but like the whole issue with the border right now is that basically Belarus doesn't want to let in the Afghan refugees, and neither does Poland, because Poland right now is like really right wing leaning, and it's kind of very nationalistic, so they don't want to let anybody in. And there's basically it's a really horrible situation on the border. Basically the refugees are kind of like dying in no man's land, and people are not letting anybody into the country, and it's become like a big political thing, and basically like people's opinions on the topic are kind of split down the line, like both ways, because half of the people believe that we should act humanely as Poland, and we should like help these people out and like let in doctors and do things like that, while the other half believe that we should protect our sovereignty and not let anybody in, because that will just be the beginning of terrorists basically coming into our country.
And is the EU Poland as a government, because as you said, the government's right-wing nationalistic at the moment, so they're saying, no, we're building a wall, and there's anything from the EU says will matter. This is our own sovereign issue. We're making this decision. It doesn't matter what the EU says. And the EU is saying, no, we have these rules that, migrants, we have to take care of refugees. And then Poland's like, well, if that's that's what's causing this big friction at the moment, yeah?
Well, there's an even bigger issue around that, because recently, our government wants to kind of do what they want. They don't want to, it's basically accountable to the EU. And it kind of wants to remove that pressure that's coming from the EU. So actually what they did recently is that they made like a statement that says that being part of the EU is against the Polish constitution. So technically, like what should happen right now is that Poland should either leave the EU or the EU should change its laws so that they're not against the Polish constitution. So it's actually like I was taking part in the protests, like a week ago or something like that. So it's kind of a crazy situation in that respect. But yeah, they're trying, they just don't want to be accountable to the EU, and obviously it's pissing most people off because we had a referendum, like most people voted to be in the EU. So yeah, that's the situation.
Okay, thank you for that.
Real quick, one of the legal issues that has come up that's been the challenge is that they're basically saying that Polish courts supersede the
EU
EU.
courts,
So
that's right.
that is the big thing that's going on.
Correct.
And and if you know, a number of years ago, they moved out a couple of their legacy judges too. So the timing and of these transitions are pretty interesting of what Poland has been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've also done that to kind of be able to control the law courts. So like before, this was kind of like an independent institution which wasn't selected by any of the leading parties. And right now, basically, they've kind of put their people in place, so they're voting through their laws, which is, crazy. Like they voted in this abortion law, which basically says that like women who have information that their children will be born with abnormalities or with illnesses cannot have an abortion. Like it's the strictest. I believe it's the strictest abortion law in Europe, and people were against it. Like the Polish people were against it. There were massive protests across the whole country, but because this right-leaning government, like this is what they want, this is what they stipulated when they were getting elected, that this is what they will do, and they have followed through. They have done that.
But one thing I want to add, Robert, quickly, I'm sorry, Tyler, is that in Europe and Poland specifically, because my chairman's from there, is that there's a lot of this has to do with economics as well. Like in Europe, and I got my undergrad there living in Holland, there is a big influx with these countries to get out of the EU because they didn't get what they perceive as being promise of this, global currency and growth. They've been more stipulated. And so maybe these right-wing governments or whatever rise up to power to say, look, we're going to just, dial it back and figure out how to take care of our own country. So I think this is part of a bigger trend, in my opinion, going on throughout Europe and the EU.
What you
Yeah.
have is the economies are better. Poland, their economy has done way better. I mean, think about it. They didn't jump into a number of things that everybody else wanted to dial into. You also have the rest of the Balkans that are now starting to side with Poland. So you're getting a new kind of block that's developing, and it's their economies were better, but you have the risk of all this immigration that is actually driving some, or illegal immigration that's also driving some other challenges, and their want for independence. Because Polish government, I remember them saying, hey, we already have Ukrainian refugees in our country. And the Hungarians have said the same thing. So
Yeah,
why are we going to take people who are not of the same religion? So
correct.
there's a huge dynamic going on there.
Right. Well, I've been saying that this whole migration issue is going to become one of the biggest issues of this decade due to climate, water stress issues, and food and famine issues. And we're already seeing the headlines that Ethiopia is starting to have mass famine, and political instability, etc., supply chain breakdowns of all kinds. This is all going to get really nasty very quickly. And this is an interesting little, pre-glimpse of it, where you have very incredibly small numbers of people. Oh, by the way, there's a headline I have coming up today that there's a new migratory wave coming up through Mexico, aiming to come to America.
Oh, yes. That's crazy, by the way, Tyler. Sorry.
Because
They're fighting Mexicans.
correct.
Like the migrants are just, like bulldozing the police. I saw some over the weekend to get to the U.S., which is very scary.
Hey, Tyler,
Yes.
just to jump back to this climate piece very, very briefly, but the Bangkok Post published an article today that I just tweeted out. I don't think I tagged Tech News, but this was the hottest, 2020 was the hottest year on record in Asia, according to a UN report. And in this article, they kind of break down the the financial implications on countries throughout the region. And of course, they're all in the hundreds of billions of dollars around development and infrastructure and other implications due to climate change. So I just wanted to throw that in to support your last point.
Yeah. So just in the past 24 hours, so here's Reuters. New migrant caravan in Mexico pushes past blockade to head north. Migrants from Central America walk in a caravan headed to Mexico capital to apply for asylum and refugee status. Several thousand migrants from South and Central America set off from southern Mexico, headed north on Saturday, clashing with law enforcement trying to hold back the caravan. Some people among the latest mass movement of migrants trying to pass north through Mexico said they hope to eventually reach the U.S. border, where the number of migrants trying to gain entry was already hitting new records. Some 3,000 people, including families of young children, began trekking on foot on Saturday.
I'm sorry, Tyler, and if I can interject, no, it's not what I saw. It's not several thousand; it's several 100,000. I'm like the Million Man March. I saw photos, and it's a lot of people, man.
It says U.S. authorities have arrested more than 1.7 million at the U.S. border this year, the most ever recorded.
Yeah. Well, there's also another wave because America is just focused on America, but some of these groups that are avoiding going through Mexico are also going south. So whereas Colombia was dealing with Venezuela for a bit, they are also getting some of these other migrants that are Haitian and Central Americans that are, since they know they can't go north, they're trying to go to Colombia. And then also there's been pushback from Chile because Chile has a pretty solid pretty solid economy. And Chile, they've been having protests that have been pushing back. The locals, the citizens are pushing back on these illegal immigrants too. So it's happening in more places than people think.
So back to the Poland issue. For those who don't know, Poland, the people seeking refugee status coming out of Afghanistan had to go essentially through Iran, which we read those reports a month ago when they were starting to flee, and some went through Iran. They go up over through like Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, which those are incredibly big mountains, by the way, to go that way. They might have gone through Turkmenistan and gone around the Caspian Sea. That's possible as well. Either way, they end up in Ukraine. And then from Ukraine, you get to the Ukraine and Belarus both touch on Poland. And the significance of Poland in this case is it's the doormat of the EU. Once you're in Poland, you're in the EU. Now you're in the Schengen zone. There's no more border to worry about. You could get all the way through. You could go all the way down to Portugal if you wanted. Once you get into Poland, so you could even get up into Scandinavia, etc. So it's a European issue as well as a Polish issue, and it's a very large issue. And many people will bring up the Muslim issue, and because there have been, since the Syrian refugees that came around 2015, 2016, there's been more, there's been terrorism-like activities that has caused a lot of strong reaction against bringing in more immigrants, specifically from the Middle East. So this is going to get very interesting very quickly. Worth keeping an eye on how this develops. So the next one is from The Independent. The UK faces bus driver shortage as staff leaving in droves for better paying jobs. This is the headline from The Independent. UK faces bus driver shortage as staff leaving in droves for better paying jobs. And I guess they want to drive trucks because there's such a demand for the trucks to drive supplies that they're paying a real premium. And so now the bus drivers are leaving to fulfill those roles. And then Dr. Fran sends in this really interesting one that an assisted living facility for retired folks introduces virtual reality. Oak Hammock at the University of Florida offers a virtual reality experience on a weekly basis for its residents. So now you've got the silver economy adopting virtual reality. And Forbes is reporting that women founders and funders are outperforming. So why is gender inequality still a thing? Or they even say growing. And what can we do about it? It says women founders are outperforming their male counterparts, yet not a week goes by without another headline about the growing gender gap for both founders and funders. Quarterly venture funding for female founders dropped to a 3-year low, with women getting only 2.7%. Shockingly, only 5.6% of U.S.-backed VC firms are women-led, and only 2.4% of all VC partners are women. There is strong evidence that proves female-managed U.S. funds outperform all-male rivals, even when accounting for risk and COVID-related market swings. Of all the U.S. VC firms that ranked in the top quartile between 2009 and 2018, 69.2% of them had women in decision-making roles. In spite of this compelling data, it will take 2.5 centuries for female fund managers to achieve equal status to their male counterparts at a current rate of progress.
And of course, this extends beyond just the VC community, right? So I was at a planning meeting for a conference session last week, and we were talking about who we would invite as the keynote plenary speakers. And I just saw like a list of names, and I called out to one of my colleagues and I said, "Hey, I think these were all male names." So there were 12 people. And, he probably said, "Oh, no, there's one woman," right? And so I think that there needs to be a bit of intentionality, just so that, we recognize and we speak and then we act. But I think sometimes we just kind of get into our normalized behaviors, and then we just perpetuate the systems that already exist.
Okay.
But Lakeisha,
Go ahead.
I agree with you. You should just follow Emily Chain, because it's been proven, I think, the last 2 or 3 years that not even just women, but diversity leaderships on venture capital have outperformed greatly those of the traditional VCs. But it only gets a short story, and then it's moved back down, which still blows my mind. And I don't want to just think racism or whatever, but I don't think it takes centuries. But it's so intriguing, because if you have a diverse group, male, female, whatever, at the board table, they're going to like what we're doing in tech news. They're going to offer a more macro view of what's going on and drill down from different perspectives. As long as everyone treats each other well and can agree, versus this old boy network, or we all think the same, we all go to the same golf club, and we're all good and we'll hide each other's secrets, which is just, to me, bullshit.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if money is green, money will find its place. So
But I don't think it automatically happens, Robert. And
Exactly,
so what
Robert.
I
I
do when
don't
I'm
think
in
so
these
as well.
situations, what I do when I'm in these situations, and like the underlying unsaid, notion might be, well, we need to have qualified people, or we want to make sure. I mean, I have a Rolodex of people that are highly credentialed, and they're badass, so that and many times they have stronger vitas than the people who were already initially slated. So I think that yes, the money will follow, but at the same time, it does take a certain level of intentionality just to get the people's names on the table, and then let them do what they do to shine.
Okay. Next up is Tesla joined the $1 trillion valuation club since we met last time. And Italy puts in a new tough law requiring workers to test or vaccinate. The rollout went more or less smoothly, with only scattered protests, as the majority of citizens accepted the new Green Pass as a tolerable sacrifice to stem COVID. And they now have this new EU QR code that they carry on their phones called the Green Pass. And then Lucast in the audience sends in this one from The Independent in the UK, that the US has a riot commission to figure out what really happened on January 6th. And the riot commission chair, reportedly, is saying that there's no question that Trump allies planned the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Chair speaks after House votes to hold Bannon in contempt. The chair of the House Select Panel investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol said on Sunday that Steve Bannon's testimony is crucial to understanding the premeditated nature of the attack. Speaking with Margaret Brennan on CBS's Face the Nation, Representative Benny Thompson reacted to unearthed footage of Mr. Bannon predicting chaos and all hell breaking loose at the event on a podcast just a day before the January 6th. Ms. Brennan then asked the chairman, how premeditated was this attack? Well, there's no question, says the committee's leading Democrat, who added, the worst kept secret in America is that former President Donald Trump invited individuals to come to Washington on January 6th. Mr. Thompson then went on to explain why Mr. Bannon, who faces potential penalties for refusing to comply with the committee's subpoenas if the Justice Department takes action, was so crucial of a witness for the panel to examine. Here's a quote. Steve Bannon was part of the conversation and the promotion of January 6th. The very podcast we just listened to talks about it. Steve Bannon was in the war room and he was in the Willard Hotel doing a lot of things. So that's why we subpoenaed him. That's why we felt it was important for the committee and staff to depose him. Okay.
Tyler, a couple
Yes.
of the comments from the hearings, because I listened to some of the hearings from the opposition. One of their questions to Garland, who is the Attorney General for the U.S., relating to this June 6th, some call it insurrection, some call it a lot of different things, was, has any one of the hundreds that have been charged with insurrection or sedition? And the response is, so far, no. And so one of the things that the opposition is going to start pushing is that if nobody has been charged with sedition or insurrection, then the left is actually playing this more than what it is. Now, we all saw what we saw, but that's the narrative that seems to be surfacing here on the opposition side.
Makes sense, yeah. So the next...
And
Go ahead.
just, Robert, to your point, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Maybe King can add. I think, though, they're ultimately after some congressional members. I think that's the latest news today, that were complying with Trump. And I agree with you. If someone is being charged, they need to be charged for anything, whatever it is. So we have both parties fighting each other, left and right, for political gain in the U.S., which isn't the rule of law, which is supposed to be fair. But there are certain Congress, I think there's a story coming out in Rolling Stone, or just came out, that kind of highlights this, about some congressional members were involved with facilitating that. And so that will maybe come out later.
So the next one somebody tweeted in is from the New York Times, opinion piece by Paul Krugman, who's a Pulitzer Prize or Nobel Prize winner. And his latest piece, the question is China in big trouble? And his conclusion is, China's in deep shit. And as we've read recently, other economists are starting to worry this could be a very big problem that could spill over globally. The next one's from BB from Nikkei Japan, that Japan Airlines books seats on British and German flying cars. Japan Airlines plans to launch business at Expo 2025 in Osaka. So more flying cars coming quickly, which would be ideal in Tokyo. Tokyo would be an ideal city for flying cars, by the way. The next one from BB, from South China Morning Post, says that Alibaba, Tencent rename their NFTs as digital collectibles amid bubble fears. The two companies' rebranding moves followed state media recent warnings of potential huge bubble in the new digital asset market of NFTs. So they're not calling them NFTs, they're calling them digital collectibles. And Ken sends in this one from the New York Times, that Russia is challenging Joe Biden again with broad cyber surveillance operation. The new campaign came only months after President Biden imposed sanctions on Moscow in response to a series of spy operations it had conducted. And Russia's ramping up their cyber attacks on U.S. key infrastructure. And then this one, I forget who sent this in, is a Twitter thread from somebody named Alina Chan. I believe this was Dr. Donish, and I'm tweeting it out now, and she makes, as a virologist, makes an incredibly strong argument for why we need to understand the origins of COVID, because we have more pandemics will come ahead. And she starts off by saying, if SARS had came from a lab, genetic engineering is very much on the table. This wasn't my view a year ago. However, in light of grant proposals and reports released in the past 2 months, we know that novel SARS-like viruses were being synthesized and engineered at unprecedented scale. What is going on to inform us on this question, was SARS genetically engineered, is getting full access to all of the communications and documents US-based scientists, editors, and funders had relating to any novel SARS work. State-of-the-art coronavirus genome engineering has been seamless for several years. You don't need to be nefarious to make your own synthetic genomes seamless. We can't use the genome sequence alone to infer whether genetic engineering has occurred. Some top experts are going around telling journalists and investigators that we would expect to see signs of manipulation, or that you would expect genetic engineering in 2019 to follow rules from the 2000s. Your science is out of date. If you ask the experts who actually are caught up on coronavirus genome engineering and have personally engineered coronaviruses, some of the best have said they don't know if SARS-2 was genetically engineered. So it's a very long Twitter thread. I've just done the first 3 of 10. So I shared that for those who want to deep dive on that. And with that, we will take a break and join in about 5.5 hours for a Subway sandwich break.